Wormhole creation successful, I heard Ux mutter behind me. A second later, Truffles announced over the room's speakers, Wormhole creation successful. Beginning phase 1. Stabilizing aperture oscillations. Power levels stable. Inserting immediate area sensor now. The AI's voice now had the speech patterns of my former wife. The conjoined human and AI's interactions were disturbing the hell out of me. I'd never witnessed my former wife operating at such deep interface levels before, and if I had my wish, I'd never do so again. When the augmented human-AI pairing finished its report, new information overlays appeared in my iris's peripheral area, showing columns of data. I mostly ignored the new information and just watched the show. In the chamber beyond my viewing window, the small sensor stalk was quickly advanced into the wormhole aperture. I could only imagine our scanner suddenly appearing from a circular distortion ring floating in space, a quarter of a light year away from our current position. A much larger overlay appeared directly in my field of view, which showed the relayed view from the camera now outside the distant terminus of the wormhole. I watched the view showing a star field pan around as the sensor swiveled to scan its new surroundings. The camera's fractional light speed velocity became apparent when the image stars shifted slightly in color from bluish to reddish as the view changed from almost directly ahead to towards the rear. No local objects detected, Truffles said, thankfully this time with its normal AI voice. We had not expected to see the Hemru probe from the initial wormhole terminus location, as we had wanted to open it a safe distance away in empty space. The view of the starfield continued to pan around until it was looking back towards the edge of the wormhole terminus itself. The purplish distortion ring surrounding the reflective disk of the wormhole terminus was revealed with the narrow sensor stalk extending from it. From this angle, the projected view allowed for a glimpse back through the wormhole into its origin crater. I smiled as I could just make out the window Omu and I were standing behind. Unfortunately, the glass was too reflective to make out the black-colored android or myself. The sensor stalk lengthened and visibly bent further, shifting the view of the distortion ring off to the side. This allowed the camera to look behind the wormhole, so to speak. A brighter star emerged as the ring slid sideways. It was more red than I'd expected. "Is that?" I started to ask. "Saul, from 16,000 astronomical units away. You are now looking at yourself from a quarter light year's distance," Omu said, interrupting my question. Wow, the star was bright, but not that much brighter than some of the others. The far end of our wormhole was a long way out there. Phase 1 complete, beginning Phase 2, energizing auxiliary power source, Truffles announced audibly. The viewport showing the camera's view shrank and was returned to the periphery of my visual field. I returned my attention to the scene outside the thick window just in time to see the new flash of light as another wormhole formed near a large power coupling attached to the clustered toroid shape of the main wormhole generator. This new wormhole had been created from a generator currently located in near orbit around the asteroid. There, a recently completed space station hosted one of the new atomic dynamos we designed and built to provide enormous quantities of short-duration power. We would need this extra power to accelerate significant masses to send them through the extremely long-range wormhole. The just-formed smaller wormhole was our solution to coupling the new power source to the local machinery. Instead of using beamed power or long superconducting cables, we could just create a new wormhole linkage and directly couple the two machines as if they were physically adjacent to each other. The new wormhole stabilized and moved slightly closer to the main power coupling, finally coming to rest 30 centimeters from the large junction. A few seconds later, a grouping of large conduits extended from the new wormhole and connected themselves, causing the chamber lights to brighten as the asteroid's power reserves were augmented. Auxiliary energy connected. Available energy now 43% higher than previously, Truffles reported. The 10-meter-long injection mechanism moved forward to position itself in the center of the wormhole aperture, displacing the sensor stalk off to one edge. The blur of lights indicating the accelerating compensation matter in the outer toroidal ring began to spin up even faster as additional power was sent into the wormhole. Launching first scout probe in 3 seconds. 2, 1, injection, Truffles relayed. There was a very notable vibration and power surge as the injection mechanism accelerated the first small probe and shot it into the wormhole. When the small sphere passed through the tear in space, the room felt like it shuddered slightly, and I felt a strange sensation of dizziness. The compensation indicators, which had slowed due to the probe's transition, began building again. The long injection gun repositioned itself slightly, and 8 seconds later there was a similar surge in disorientation as the second spherical probe was launched and sent through. After the third probe was launched, I felt myself relax as the final bout of nausea passes. I realized that my hands were clenched on the body cradle's railing because of the unease I'd felt during each launch. Omu noticed. From your visible physical discomfort, I surmised the area effect wormhole spatial transition phenomenon was greater this time. Do you wish to depart the immediate area? I can order a pause in operations. The nausea I'd felt had been stronger than any I'd experienced during previous wormhole usages, but not too strong to tolerate. The phenomenon was still mostly a mystery. It was something only living beings experienced, as the AIs could not detect anything other than the power draw during the transits. It would likely remain a mystery as no long-term effects had come from the brief nausea felt by humans, and research into the causes was not a current high priority. No, I'm fine. It just felt stronger with those 3 probes than it had with other wormhole transitions, I replied. Let's continue with the mission. I can deal with it. Of course, John. Be warned that the Ono probe will likely cause even greater symptoms. I just nodded at the android. At least the larger probe's passage would be a quick, one-and-done event. With the 3 probes now beyond the outer edges of the solar system, the auxiliary power was no longer needed until we sent probe Ono through. I watched the physical coupling detach itself with a bright electrical discharge and the small linkage wormhole disappear. Auxiliary power temporarily disconnected, Truffles announced. The orbiting station would now idle down its atomic dynamo until probe Ono was ready to be sent through. I imagined the power station in Vesta orbit, quenching its nuclear fires, and wondered if the satellite was visible overhead. I looked upwards through my viewing window, but the orbiting station was not currently above this portion of Vesta, receiving transmissions from the 3 scouting probes, Truffles reported. The 3 small spheres were spreading out as they moved away from the wormhole on slightly separate vectors. The first to be sent contained a compact radar emitter and would soon begin discharging microwaves into the black spaces ahead. The other 2 probes had deployed receiving antennas and would be listening for the radar returns from the Hemru device. We would need to wait a short while for the 3 to separate further before triangulation would allow for an accurate fix. While we waited, Ono became active, using its mobility arms to pull itself towards the launching mechanism. Sova and Marissa appeared over the crater's rim, using their suits' maneuvering jets. The 2 humans arrived at the injection railgun at the same time as probe Ono and helped reconfigure it to hold a larger probe. Scouting probes confirmed detection of an object matching the expected radar signature of the alien probe, which transited the solar system 3.18 years ago, Truffles announced. I was about to question why I was not seeing an image when the AI continued. Radar returns placed the detected object 300 to 42,000 kilometers ahead of the current location of the wormhole terminus. Target location accuracy continues to improve as the scouts spread and the baselines increase. I found the graphic in my iris display that showed the AI's time estimate for how long the final location fix would take. They calculated that in about 3 minutes, we'd know the location of the Hemru probe accurately enough to reposition the wormhole and send through probe Ono. I was about to go make myself a bulb of coffee when a small flashing alert indication caught my eye. It was my message queue's preset alarm, which was set to alert me if I received messages from my immediate family. I saw that I actually had 5 family messages waiting. I quickly scrolled the list and saw that they were congratulatory messages from Serenity, Charity, Larissa, and Ben. As I read their messages, 2 additional messages made it through my filters, including one from Hannah. Like much of humanity, they must have been closely following the mission, and since the coverage included multiple cameras here in the control room, watching me physically observe the proceedings, I was attracting a lot of attention. I looked at the general inbox and was shocked to find I had received well over 100,000 messages from non-family members. Naomi, have you been monitoring my inbox? What's the general gist of those messages? I sub-vocalized to my AI minder. The vast majority are expressions of congratulations and hope for the success of the mission, Naomi reported. After a short pause, it continued. The messages also indicate an extremely positive perception of your role in promoting both the exploitation of wormhole technology and for aggressive pursuing actions against the assemblage, the AI added. I didn't detect any chagrin with her admission, but I could not help but rub it in slightly. So it seems it was a good idea to come here and personally oversee and witness the mission? There was a long pause which made me smirk slightly. That would likely be a correct assumption. I kept any further comment to myself, taking my win with grace. I also watched the updated information in my iris's peripheral display show our small fleet of probes continuing to spread apart, further refining the location of the Hemru probe. The two human techs out in the crater had finished mounting Probe Ono onto the launcher and were now jetting off back to their sheltered bunker. The squid-like black probe was facing the wormhole bulbous end first with its long trailing arms lying alongside the launcher rail behind it. When go time arrived, the rail would propel Probe Ono into the wormhole much more gently than it had with the smaller scouts. With the probe's attachment complete, we simply had to wait for the location and shift the wormhole. It's not too late to trade places with me, Omu, I heard Probe Ono say in my implants. I looked at the android next to me to see how she responded to her copy's taunting message. Omu responded by placing her small android hand up to the window. Good luck, Ono. I will see you on the other side someday, the android said quietly. Foreign object location is now refined enough to permit shifting wormhole terminus, Truffles reported. Transitioning wormhole terminus to within proximity of target in 12 seconds. Out in the crater, the small telemetry and camera probe withdrew to this side of the active wormhole. This was to save energy as the terminus was moved about 1/3 of a million kilometers closer to the alien probe's current location. John, Omu said quietly, the alien probe could react offensively to the sudden appearance of the wormhole. I have to advise you to withdraw yourself from this control room. We can delay the transition long enough to have the local wormhole transport you to the distant shipyard. I reached over and put my hand on my friend's shoulder. Thank you for your concern, Omu, but I'll stay here. Proceed with shifting the wormhole. 5, 4, Truffles began counting down. The AI's words faded to the background as I focused on the wormhole aperture. I was able to see a shimmer in the edges of the distortion ring as compensation energies were fed into the portal to accelerate the terminus further away from its current location in space. 10 seconds later, the energy flow into the compensators slowed as the wormhole ceased its movement towards the target. It had transitioned over 300,000 kilometers and now should be around 1 kilometer away from the alien probe. The waiting sensor stalk was again inserted through the wormhole boundary to better allow it to scan the vicinity of the new terminus point. Alien device detected both thermally and in the visible spectrum, Truffles said a few seconds later. My iris overlay showing the sensor camera's view enlarged to show the detected object. The image shifted as the camera cycled through many wavelengths, before ending with the Hemru probe glowing slightly in infrared. There was simply too little reflected starlight to allow a decent view in the visual spectrum. Nor did the wormhole's current sunward location provide enough of an aspect change to show any of the object's profile against the faint background stars being occulted. A magnified composite view of the Hemru device finally appeared in my overlay. This digitally enhanced image revealed the alien object possessed a long cylindrical shape. The cylinder part was barely discernible as the camera's current viewpoint was from nearly astern of the cylinder and nearly in alignment with its long axis. If I had to estimate, I would say we were looking at the base of the Hemru probe from an off angle of about 15 degrees. Also, there were enough visible surface features in the enhanced image to show that the alien object was slowly rotating about its long axis. The rotation was very slow, however, and must have been for stability reasons and not for simulating gravity. Data appeared next to the enhanced image showing the object's rough dimensions. It was about 8 meters in diameter and over 10 times that in length. A port or muzzle was visible, centered on the object's concave dished bottom. "Is that a rocket exhaust?" I asked Omu. Due to the orientation of the alien device and the fact that the orifice you are referring to is almost perfectly aligned with the projected location of the Hemru star system, it is likely that we are observing the emitter end of an interstellar range transmitter. Due to the compact nature of the device, I would estimate that the communication method is by modulated high-energy laser, Omu explained. Even if it was just an interstellar range communications port and not a rocket drive, I was reminded of the Kzinti lesson. I was about to express this worry verbally when the android continued. "Our wormhole terminus is currently offset 14 degrees from both the rotational axis of the object and the center line of the visible emitter. We should remain safe if the alien device should suddenly begin projecting high-energy photons." I looked back out into the wormhole machine's chamber and noted its current orientation. As it was facing almost directly away from my viewport's location, I could not help but notice that if a high-power laser suddenly came shining through the active wormhole, this control room would be in the line of fire. Omu must have noticed my observation. "We are monitoring the alien device closely, John. If it reorients itself to target the wormhole, we will actively shift the terminus location or immediately suspend the portal." A flash outside the window caused me to shift my attention away from the overlay and back towards the wormhole chamber. The auxiliary power wormhole had formed again, and the remote power coupling was moving in to reattach itself to the main power junction. We'd need the power augmentation of the orbiting station's atomic dynamo to send probe Ono's mass through. "Auxiliary power reconnected, bringing remote fission reactor to maximum," Truffles and Ukes said simultaneously. I noticed that when something complicated was happening, the human and AI voices blended together. When things were less busy, they were able to remain more distinct and retain separation. This was still disturbing, and I made a note to have a long talk about it with Ux. I was distracted from that worry by a sudden flaring of bright light outside the viewport. The far rim of the wormhole crater had begun to be illuminated by a harsh flickering brightness that reminded me of a welding arc. A big welding arc. As I pondered the source of the glare, I quickly deduced that it was being caused by something unseen which had just risen over the asteroid's horizon from somewhere behind my current location. Remembering the AI's recent message, I realized that the powerful new light must be a reflection from the orbiting auxiliary power satellite. Its slow orbit must have finally brought it around to this side of the asteroid and now into line of sight with the crater. To reinforce the theory, the radiation dosimeter built into my iris overlay pinged a new alarm. I brought its readings into the foreview and noted that the previous slow and steady accumulation rate brought on by the nearby active wormholes had now increased drastically. I quickly scrolled through my iris menu, looking for a surface camera feed channel that was monitoring orbital space above the crater. After dismissing a dozen alternate views of the main wormhole crater and of myself in the control room, I found what I was looking for. The view showed the black starfield overhead, interrupted by a blazing, 100-kilometer-long double sword of atomic fire. The two opposing bright lines of fission energy were bisecting a large glowing object, which must have been the main bulk of the auxiliary power satellite. The satellite was a hurried and compromised solution to the problem of generating enormous amounts of short-duration power. It was basically two high-thrust nuclear torch rocket ships mounted in opposition for balance reasons, nose first to a central fuel and power handling satellite. As the two rockets blasted out their long atomic rocket flames, energy was captured via magnetoplasma dynamic coils around long superconducting drive tubes. The captured energy was then directed to the central station, where it was stabilized by huge capacitor banks before being sent through a short-range wormhole linkage to the asteroid. The system was brute force, compact, and had the benefit of being based on the long-proven technology of our torch rockets. The power station we'd built here in Vesta orbit was an early prototype. Now that it had proven itself in actual long-range wormhole use, the plan was for similar devices to be incorporated into the military wormhole complex currently under construction on Phobos in Mars orbit. I studied the slowly moving power satellite and activated additional filters in my iris menu to dim the harsh glare of the nuclear lances. With those fires dampened, I could make out the structure of the satellite itself. It sprouted a crown of cooling fins which were glowing with radiated waste heat from the reactors and power accumulators. The orientation of the power satellite was aligned to match the axis of rotation for the asteroid. This kept the dangerous, opposed nuclear lances from impacting the surface as the station orbited above Vesta's equator. I deduced that the exhaust plumes would make space approaches very tricky, as any mining or cargo ships leaving or arriving at the North Polar Station would have to maneuver carefully to avoid the temporary zone of death the power satellite was currently creating. Auxiliary power levels at maximum. Launching pro bono in 15 seconds, I heard over the room's speakers. I quickly dismissed the camera feed showing the orbital power satellite and focused my attention back out that viewport. The glaring light show was now reflecting off the sleek black probe as the launching railgun moved back into position centered on the aperture of the long-range wormhole. "Here I go, Jon. Wish me luck," Ono said in my implant. "Good luck, Ono," I said quickly. I suddenly remembered that the AI out there on the launching rail was only minutes removed from being a part of my android friend standing beside me. I reached over and put my arm around Omu. I didn't know if the gesture would matter to the android, but it did make me feel better. 3, 2, 1, launch, Ux muttered from her inverted position at the console. This time the room's speakers remained disturbingly silent while the physical humans spoke. Outside, the black squid-like device was flung down the launching rail and into the wormhole. There was a shudder and a few visible electrical discharges from the sudden energy density flowing into the wormhole to compensate for the probe's mass as it was accelerated down the path through warped space. The sudden and intense nausea I felt as Probe Ono's mass was sent a quarter light year away almost made me vomit. I quickly bent over and clenched my gut as I attempted to quell the sensation. Luckily, the sensation faded almost as quickly as it had arrived, and I was able to focus on the camera feed showing the view from the sensor stalk. It showed the arms of the probe receding as it left the vicinity of the wormhole's terminus, heading for the alien device. I am through and on course, proceeding towards the alien device at approximately 12 meters per second. I will be slowing periodically as I approach and will come to rest stationary to the probe in approximately 200 seconds. My arrival has generated no detectable emissions or responses as of yet. As Ono finished its message, the glaring reflections from the chamber beyond the window faded. Now that the large mass of the probe had been sent and accelerated to the edge of the solar system, the auxiliary power satellite's power production was no longer needed. Its atomic dynamos were quickly idled down and quenched to save its precious reserves of fissile fuel. Reducing wormhole aperture size to limit required energy input, Truffles said. Out in the wormhole crater, the active distortion ring inside the main wormhole torus began to shrink. I watched as it continued shrinking until it was only a few dozen centimeters across. The inserted sensor stalk remained centered on the now shrunken wormhole. It would continue to exist both here and a quarter light year away and act as a data relay for Probe Ono. The dozens of fusion power plants clustered in the deep craters of the asteroid's south pole were now able to easily supply enough power to operate the wormhole in data-only mode. There was also enough excess capacity to begin recharging the depleted ESU's storage banks, as well as to allow the rest of the asteroid to return to a more normal operating state fairly soon. Dispersing relay and remote platforms, I heard Probe Ono report. The camera feed showed a half-dozen small, grapefruit-sized objects slowly drift away from the main probe's body. The daughter probes would act as relay satellites and additional camera and electromagnetic sensor platforms. Some would follow the main probe in close, while others kept their distance. The latter were to spread out and eventually move into a wide, slow orbit of the alien device. This would take hours due to their slow initial speed, but eventually we would have coverage of the Hemru probe from all angles. I watched in silence for another half-minute as Ono continued its approach. The camera view switched from the feed coming from the sensor penetrating the wormhole to the higher capability camera on board the black squid-like Scout. With the higher resolution and closer proximity of Ono's instruments, more details of the alien device were now visible. Among these were several spikes or fins extending outward from the surface of the cylinder. Cameras or antennas? Maybe defensive weaponry. I suspected we'd find out soon enough. Transmitting Hemru-coded introductory message. Probe Ono sent as it continued to approach the alien device. I found I was holding my breath as the seconds ticked by after our transmission. Nothing visible in the camera's view was happening, and I suspected the AI would inform me if any non-visible changes were ongoing on the alien probe. "Jon, help me, please," Ux almost whispered to me. I untangled myself from my perch by the viewport and used the floor-mounted graspers to make my way to where my former wife knelt. The embedded cranial couplers were being withdrawn from the sockets lining the back of her skull. Once they were free, they retracted themselves out of the way back into the control console. The body cradle that held her small shell began rotating her upright. Her eyes were busy under closed lids, and her fingers were clenching and unclenching into tight fists. I quickly reached out and pulled her to me. "I'm here, honey," I said soothingly into her neck. She latched onto me and pulled herself into my embrace. "Hold me, Jon," she gasped out. "This is the worst part." I did as she asked or text and felt her shudder and tremble in my embrace. After she calmed, I pulled away far enough to see her face. Her eyes were blinking strongly, as if she was trying to focus her vision. Finally, she noticed my concerned expression as I studied her and gave me a sad smile. "I know this probably looks creepy as hell, Jon, and I'll admit it is a bit creepy to endure. I'm sorry for subjecting you to it, but I have to use full immersion to keep up with the AI as it processes the calculations required for long-ranged wormhole spatial compensation." "Can't the machines do those on their own?" I protested. "Now they probably can, but it took my help for them to achieve the early successes. We are both learning as we go, and the experience helps me with my continuing research," she explained. The large wall screen above her work console became active. It was showing additional data being relayed through the wormhole from Probe Ono. The data included camera feeds from the main Probe Ono, as well as from the smaller daughter probes. "I am detecting ranging pulses from the alien object. I believe it's some sort of proximity alert system," Ono said. "Has the alien device responded to your transmission, Ono?" Ux said. Despite having been deeply linked to the AI's moments before, Ux had asked the question verbally, likely for my benefit, but maybe to further help her decouple her consciousness from the digital. Either her implants relayed the words to the distant scout, or Truffles or Omu did. Regardless, Probe Ono answered almost immediately, also using audible means. "No signals other than the ranging pulses have been detected, Ux. I should note, however, that those ranging pulses have increased both in frequency and number. I suspect the device has locked onto both my location and those of the smaller satellite probes which were recently released. It clearly knows we are here. I am slowing my approach." Omu joined Ux and me at the console. I glanced back towards my previous viewing location at the viewport, looking onto the crater, but realized that the show at the wormhole crater was mostly over. This was reinforced by the blast panels opening over the previously covered additional viewing windows. The dangerous part of the mission had passed, and Probe Ono and her daughter probes were now able to provide early warning if something threatened the wormhole terminus. If there was a sudden danger, Truffles would now have time to shut down the wormhole link before any feedback could threaten the facilities or control room. I saw motion in the newly uncovered windows and spotted Sova and Marissa returning to the airlock. Their active part of the mission was over, and they would soon be rejoining us inside. I gave Ux another quick hug before pulling myself over to the airlock to help the technicians remove their vacuum gear. An hour later, it was just Uxa, Omu, and I who remained in the control room. Ux was mostly back to her normal self after her recent deep immersion into the digital realm. She was sipping a bulb of hot tea while keeping an eye on the control screens. Sova was in the midst of her rest period and was in the adjacent break room taking a nap. Marissa and Tomas had gone fully off duty and had returned to the main gravity habitat area via a surface-skimming transport shuttle. They'd had to travel by that slower method as the asteroid's power reserves had not been replenished enough to allow for a resumption of the local short-range wormhole transport system. 2 replacement technicians were on the returning shuttle and would be arriving soon. Nothing much was currently happening a quarter of a light year away from the sun. Probe Ono had finished its approach to the alien device, and was now simply station-keeping less than a dozen meters from its cylindrical surface. The alien device had still not replied to our repeated communications attempts. It still emitted a periodic radar pulse to keep track of Ono's movements, but even these had decreased in frequency now that our probe had come to a standstill. We had detected a small area of the alien device warming slowly in the thermal scanner. Something was happening, and our best guess was the device was trying to reboot some higher intelligence that had previously been dormant in hibernation mode. Ux theorized that after the alien probe had traversed our solar system, its mission was basically over. It would likely have depleted the final power reserves, transmitting its findings back to the Hemru world, leaving the device with extremely limited power reserves. In an attempt to stimulate the dormant device, Probe Ono had deployed a laser scanner and illuminator. It was now doing a detailed scan and imaging pass around the entire exterior of the alien device. Ono had finished scanning 2/3 of the object. It would need to reposition itself soon to finish the last parts of it. I was entwined in a body cradle position nearby Yuxa and was trying not to let my boredom show too much. I had finished my bulb of coffee and was now mostly daydreaming of the beaches off my island, back on Earth. I was looking forward to spending time in the warmth and sun again. I was also thinking over the events of the past few months. I jumped when my introspection was interrupted by Ux speaking. Before I arrived here on Vesta, I had a long virtuality meeting with director Karn Conlon. I looked up to find her studying me with a serious expression. I waited for her to continue, but she remained silent, waiting for my response. While I considered her statement, I thought back over my own meeting with the hermaphrodite director almost 2 months earlier. After that meeting, I had not heard from the director or from any of her compatriots. I'd also not noticed any discussion of the subject on any public conscientia forum or peer group. I assumed that there would be discussions as soon as anyone with grievances became bold enough to publicly broach them. Naomi had not mentioned any new threats or security issues resulting from the meeting, and I had to admit I'd mostly forgotten the discussion due to my busy past 7 weeks. I finally spoke, breaking the silence. I have not dwelled on the subject much. On the one hand, I've made little attempt to keep the matter secret or suppress discussion of it. On the other, I've tried to restrict the use of my authority so as to prevent anyone from being upset by it and pushing the matter in the first place. She still remained silent, just continuing to study me. "What did you tell her?" I finally asked. "Officially, our meeting was her asking me to confirm an election of sorts regarding your legal claim to wield absolute authority over all humanity and also over the AIs subject to our control. I explained to Monsieur Karn Conlon that the vote to grant you unlimited powers to rule did indeed happen, and that votes were cast by myself and your daughter Abby Branco, and resulted in a majority as the only other available vote was one of abstention. I recalled that third vote as it had been mine." After a pause, she continued, "I also explained to Monsieur Karn Conlon that your unlimited authority remains in effect until either you renounce your authority or until I, as the sole human being still alive who was party to the original vote, tables a motion for a second election." I mulled over her words and a sudden worry struck me. "Uxie, what happens if your current mental continuity is interrupted by death? If I were to die, a new election to confirm your continuing authority would be triggered automatically. All of humanity would now form the electorate, although any who have not reached BM or any humans currently considered citizens of the Amazon Protectorate would be excluded," she explained. My worries were apparently founded. Before I could express them aloud, Naomi interrupted. "Understand that Miss Esperanza's safety is a key priority of mine, John. I have been aware of both her importance to you and also to the quorum with which the foundation of your legal authority resides. Thus, she has been under a similar security overwatch as you have lived under for much of the past 2 centuries. Oak's expression revealed that she had been unaware of this overwatch. She quickly regained control of her emotions, as her genius-level IQ considered the ramifications of Naomi's statement. I caught the flicker of chagrin as she realized that she should have already deduced what the AI had just revealed. Although, now that the two of you are openly discussing the subject, a minor issue over John's legal authority to rule should be addressed. I saw that Ux had caught the second slight emphasis on the AI's use of legal when mentioning my authority. Her brow furrowed, but I shook my head slightly. We could discuss that later. What's the issue, Naomi? I asked. With the demise of Abby Adams Branco, the original quorum of 3 is now just 2. Since 2 votes can result in an unbreakable tie, the technicality allows for a new call to vote at any time. Also, this call can originate from any human subject to your rule, but currently outside the original quorum. I understood the problem right away. I was surprised that I had never been told of the issue until now, or that there had not been a call for a revote in the past 18 decades. I was about to inquire about that, but Ux spoke first. No one knows, right? They were unaware of the nature of the original quorum. That is correct, Miss Esperanza. When Abby Branco was allowed to expire, I immediately deduced that unless changes were made to the original voting membership, John's legal authority could be called into question at any time from that point on. Because of the grief that Jon was experiencing at the time, and also due to the fact that his actual authority was never in danger, I declined to address the issue. I understood the AI's reasoning. Again, my smart former wife beat me to asking my questions. "Why bring it up now, Naomi?" she asked. "Because of the meeting Jon had with Jess Kirvestad, Adele Sol-Chilean, and Terry Karn-Conlon 7 weeks ago. His answer to Mel Karn-Conlon's questions of his authority revealed the nature of the original voting quorum. There is a likelihood that Mem Karn-Conlon, or one of her group, will consult with IUDEX about the matter. IUDEX AI will fully explain the legal issues surrounding the technicality, and as a result, a new vote could be called. Have you? I have not as of yet acted to limit the knowledge IUDEX may address, nor the accuracy of that knowledge. However, if you mandate it, Jon, I will do so, although there would be consequences of such an approach. No, Naomi, I would not wish that. The less you force compliance with the other AIs, the better. Ux was clearly relieved at my statement. As I caught her slight smile, I thought of something. Honey, would you still vote as you did nearly 2 centuries ago? I asked cautiously. My heart melted upon seeing her smile widen. Of course, Jon. I still believe in you. It helps that you have not mucked anything up too badly so far with your authority. As long as you remain sane, humanity is in good hands. I held out my hand, which she took with one of hers. Well then, dear, please call for a new vote. We will stick with the same people who were there the first time, please, I said, barely holding in a smirk. Her momentary confusion was evident. But, Jon, there are just the 2 of... Oh! She turned to consider Omu. Is that even legal? Our android friend looked to each of us with an almost curious expression. Why not? I remarked. Omu has been active since the time of the first vote. She is also now fully emancipated from Naomi. True, but I am not emancipated from you, Jon. You retain authority over my actions, Omu explained. Omu, I mandate that you express only your free will and not allow my influence over any matters relating to voting on my authority, I said with a grin. Omu's illuminated eye indications started circling as the android's processors began calculating the ramifications of what I'd just done. Naomi, would Jon's idea fulfill the technicality? I have been in consultation with EUDEX and the AI advisory group for the past 4 seconds. We agree that such a vote would be legal and valid. I would warn you that it would also likely prove highly unpopular with humanity in general if they found out. Okay, we won't tell them then, I smirked to Ux. Ux shook her head for a moment before saying, Okay, Naomi, I call for a new vote on the subject of Jon retaining full authority over humanity. Please poll the quorum. Yuxi, how do you vote on the question of allowing Jon Abrams Prime to continue to wield full authority over humanity and all intelligences under human control? Yes, she said instantly. Emancipated presence known to humans as Omu. How do you vote on the question of allowing Jon Abrams Prime to continue to wield full authority over humanity and all intelligences under human control? I smiled when Omu leaned back and appeared to rub her chin with one hand, as if considering her vote. Well, she started before pausing dramatically. I couldn't help myself and laughed out loud. I vote yes, she said with a digital smirk. There is a majority. Do you wish to record a vote and make the motion unanimous, Jon? I'll abstain, Naomi. I had been prepared to vote yes, along with Ux, assuming that Omu would abstain. I had not really considered that the android would vote no, but I was also not sure if it would vote. Her affirmative vote surprised me, and I made a note to discuss it with my old friend on sometime. I have recorded a new majority vote from a legal quorum, allowing John Abrams Prime to continue to wield absolute authority over humanity and any intelligence under humanity's control. All artificial intelligent presences in the system have been informed. Do you wish news of this vote to be disseminated among humanity? No, both Ux and I said simultaneously. We both looked at each other with embarrassment. Naomi spared us on the subject by simply replying that the AI understood. With that matter behind us, I returned to being bored. Pro Bono had completed the laser scan of the entire exterior of the alien object, and still there was no response. I also caught Omu studying me at various times. My decision to allow her to vote with Ux and I had obviously been unexpected for the android. She remained quiet, which I took as her pondering the matter deeply. The room speakers above the console suddenly came alive with Pro Bono's distinct voice. I am receiving new emissions from the alien probe. The signals appear to be formatted similar to the Hemru codes in the data archives. Uxa's face became blank as she dropped into virtuality to follow the new developments. I thought of joining her in the digital realm, but decided to stay fully physical. I'm sure she or Omu would keep me informed and aware of what was happening. Xenius AI is taking charge of the communications, she said. Her voice was without inflection and clearly under the control of her augment. Her dispassionate voice continued after a pause. Xenius reports that a Level 1 data exchange is now commencing. It reports that the controlling intelligence currently active in the Hemru probe is currently far below sentience level due to lack of available power. Well, Ux's statement confirmed one thing. The alien probe was indeed sent by the Hemru. Until now, we'd only assumed as such, but if Xenius, our AI responsible for Hemru dialogue, was calling it the Hemru probe, there must now be confirmation of the device's origin. Ux came out of virtuality and looked around, blinking for a moment before focusing on me. The AIs are collaborating on a plan to safely deliver new energies to the Hemru probe to allow for its fully sentient AI to become active. However, the Hemru probe contains tamper mechanisms, and if we are not careful, we could trigger the physical destruction of all memory storage on board. She pointed to the overhead screen, which showed Pro Bono moving forward very slowly towards the surface of the Hemru cylinder. How long do they think that will take? I asked. At least 6 hours to uncover a power delivery port. Also, to save the asteroid's power, the plan is to shut down the wormhole link to the Hemru probe for at least 14 hours to recharge Vesta's energy reserves. Later tomorrow, once we again have full power, we'll use the full reserves plus the power satellite to reestablish the wormhole and send through a fully charged ESU to supply additional power to the Hemru probe. She caught my disappointed look and took my hand. Truffles says that the asteroid has enough power to begin using the intra-asteroid wormhole transport system again. How about you use your newly reconfirmed Imperial powers and jump us into the front of the queue so we can quickly get back to the gravity train habitat for a good night's rest? I noticed that with her earlier deep virtuality session, that Ux looked as tired as I felt. Her idea sounded like a hell of a good one, though, and 15 minutes later, that's exactly what we did. I felt a bit guilty when Omu begged off returning with us via my wormhole Q-jump. The android said she would wait for the slower suborbital shuttle pod to save wormhole power for other humans who had been stuck in low-power emergency shelters. Upon hearing that, I almost hesitated before the thought of a leisurely hot shower in full gravity overcame my guilty conscience. Omu was still acting odd as Ux and I prepared to pull ourselves through the narrow wormhole tunnel. The android was assisting us to enter the horizontal portal. I let her help Ux go first. When it was my turn, I paused a moment before I climbed onto the mesh safety cone. Omu, thank you for your trust. In return, I want you to know that I will never think you less than an equal among my family and friends. I pulled her warm, smooth body into mine and gave her a hug. She resisted at first before returning the hug for a moment. Pulling away, she guided me into the intake funnel without responding. Her actions contained just the tiniest of hesitations. If I had to guess, it was either an amazing acting job or the awkwardness of unexpected emotions. I chose to take it as the latter and smiled at the feelings it brought forth.